I'm Welton Gaddy. Welcome to State of Belief, continuing coverage of the 2020 Republican National Convention. And back with me once again is political management expert Greg Lebel. And we're ready, I think, to look at some of the first day of this convention. Greg, I hope you're rested up enough to take on another long week of politics.
We'll see.
This morning I started a bad day. The day began for me having trouble because I saw the news that there was a new report out saying that 57% of Republicans say the number of COVID-19 deaths in the United States is acceptable.
Yeah, we saw that.
Acceptable.
Yeah, that's okay.
177,000 Americans have died, and that is acceptable.
Yeah.
And then I knew I had to get ready for us talking tonight. And I'm puzzled by that. I'm puzzled by the lineup on that screen, which by all reports is personally directed by the first reality TV president. Minority Whip Scalise was famously shot at a congressional baseball practice in 2017. Andrew Pollack is the grieving father of a student born whose boy who was murdered in the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida. And Mark and Patricia McCloskey are the loose cannons who pointed guns at a Black Lives Matter march and were charged with felonies for doing so. So who are we listening to? Two victims of gun violence and two reckless gun waivers. Greg, what am I missing?
I don't know what you're missing, Welton, because I'm asking myself the same question. This was a strange evening. For the reasons you've said and so many more. I've spent my evening trying to figure out who they're trying to talk to and what they're trying to say. And it's very difficult to figure out. They said, I guess we could start here. I don't know. One of the points that they made about the Democratic convention was that it was too dark, and that the Republican convention was going to be much more sort of lighter and looking for. This was not light. No. Senator Tim Scott, who ended the thing, was first of all, I think the best speech of the night, and it came the closest to being sort of forward-looking, I guess, or not just sort of stuck in this in this dark place where socialism is taking over the country and our suburbs will all be eliminated, and the language and the imagery was really quite depressing. So I don't know. I'm still trying to process it all.
Well, I guess we each get to pick our own heroes, but to be honest, Greg, between suing to keep a gay couple out of their gated community and smashing the beehives of a neighboring synagogue, the McCloskeys are perfect right-wing radio fodder. But if this is what it now takes to fire up the base, Lord help us.
Well, I think, I'm sorry.
Well, and I was just going to say, and then I'll let you go. But meanwhile, as I understand it, this convention decided the party doesn't even need a platform.
Yeah.
Put that all together for me if you can.
Yeah, this is just that sort of situation, and I think what I can discern from this message is that there's no question that this is focused at the base. It's hard to imagine anyone hearing this who isn't inclined to be shaking their head, right, could sit through this, maybe just leave it at that. But the other question it raises for me is, if this is what they feel like they need to do at this point, what does that say about their sense of their of where the base actually is? Do they feel like did they need to devote this whole night to making sure that the base is really with them? Is there something in their polling that's suggesting that it's not? And if that's the case, what is it? Are they too extreme? Are they not extreme enough? The messages I heard tonight would suggest that they're really trying to reinforce their extreme credentials. I mean, some of these speeches, I have to say, Kimberly Guilfoyle scared the daylights out of me. Yeah. That was a frightening speech, and it wasn't the only one. There were so many of those. They're attacking Joe Biden. Well, they're attacking more the Democrats than they're attacking Joe Biden as a captive of the Democratic Party, which equals socialism. There weren't any that I can recall any real serious attacks at Joe Biden's positions. In fact, many of Joe Biden's positions were misrepresented throughout the night. So it seems to be the distinction they're trying to draw is between Donald Trump and the Democratic / now Socialist Party, which seems to be that message is only a message, I think, that plays to the extremes. So. It's an interesting situation. There was you mentioned a poll that you saw earlier today, and we may have been looking at the same list of things, but there was one that I thought was interesting. One poll asked Republican voters what they wanted to see in this convention, and 85% of Republicans said they want to see what Trump would do if he is reelected. 15% said they want to see why Joe Biden should not be elected. Well, this night was focused on that 15%. Mm-hmm. So 85% of Republican respondents could not have felt like this addressed the issues the situation that they care about. So again, what was it about?
Well, I mean, you got to keep in mind who was the one telling them what to write, and what he wanted to see. A brief word from Donald Trump today turned into a 50-minute listening of grievances and conspiracies addressing the delegates gathered in Charlotte. You know, he really is the Grateful Dead of American politics, isn't he?
Oh, that's good.
Well,
that's very good.
You know, there has been a dawning amount of God talk in the first hours of this convention, including bald-faced falsehoods about the Pledge of Allegiance at the DNC convention, and overt elevation of fundamentalist Christianity to the status of a state church. Greg, for so many of us, for so many years, committed to defending the Constitution and religious freedom. And these are Republicans and Democrats that I'm talking about. We would politely point out when politicians or parties strayed far outside the lines. Have we, at long last, lost any hope of holding back this flood of falsehood mixed with theocracy?
Tonight, tonight, what we saw tonight would lead me to answer that's a lost cause. And I say that because what I saw tonight, and we saw it again, we saw it very much at the beginning. It's one thing I noted, the number of times that people were talking about religion and faith and so on and so forth, but primarily religion. And the same thing sort of happened at the end with Donald Trump Jr.'s speech. And what we've known for a long time is something that's been clearly embraced by this group of people, and that it's religion as cudgel, religion as excuse. And I think what we heard from Don Jr., which I think probably would be reflected back earlier as well, was the idea that talking about the issue, religious issues, seems to be a convenient way to cover up things they don't want to talk about. And Donald Jr. did it very explicitly in talking about how religion is being trampled in favor of demonstrations. So there's this attempt, I think, to sort of create that tension or create a tension to a perception of religious observance being trampled by cancel culture, by Black Lives Matter, by anything they can sort of come up with, and it's sort of this is our fig leaf almost. That's where it seems to be.
Yeah. You know, a number of prominent traditional Republicans and conservatives are taking part in a convention on founding principles, happening online the same 4 days of the Trump convention. The website is cfp2020.us, and speakers will include the head of a group called Christians Against Trumpism, as well as other faith leaders and former government figures. Greg, is there any possibility that something like this could actually gain some traction against the master of programming?
Among an important segment of the population, I think, and that is that group of people, and we know they're there. We've seen the movement of them over the last few years. Those folks who voted for Donald Trump to send a message because they saw him as the lesser of two evils. They just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton for whatever reason, or because they figured Hillary Clinton was going to win anyway. So here was a chance to sort of make a point. Those people are sort of floating around out there a little bit, and there are different factors that I think relate to what sort of moves them. So I think that's where this can make a difference. There are voters who are really trying to figure this out, who are sickened by this, despite the promises made, promises made, promises delivered, a thing that we saw tonight, who are looking at this saying, I don't think I'm quite tired of winning yet. I'm not sure that you are the only one who can fix this. All of those sort of lines that we were fed 4 years ago are sort of coming back now, and there's a certain group of people who I think are in one way or another sort of revisiting those and questioning, well, is this really what I thought I was bargaining for? And so those are the folks who I think will hear this group of people at this alternative convention, and the people I think that the Democrats were reaching out to last week, bringing a number of Republicans in to sort of talk about these issues from a different kind of perspective than the Trumpies.
And are those people going to vote Democratic?
That's the hope. I think that's the challenge, and I think, as I said, I think Biden, to many of them, is a more appealing alternative. But also, I think part of it is it's not maybe Biden isn't more appealing, but Trump has become so unappealing they may rather than vote for Trump, they may not vote at all. And so there are two things, there are two dynamics going on here. Who will end up sort of voting, switching their vote and voting for Biden, and how many of those Trumpies, and this is how many of those Trumpies will not vote at all. And to some extent, I think that may be what's worrying, what we saw as worrisome to these people tonight, that particular group.
Finally, in this tabloid age we live in, the first prominent political religious right figure to endorse Trump and get the ball rolling for evangelical support, Jerry Falwell Jr., has been exposed as the worst kind of hypocrite. Without getting into the salacious details, I'll just say Michael Cohen was right. But, you know, this is a house of cards that's not about to crumble, I don't think, because I really think for all the talk of values and morals, it really is just a big fat political power play at this point. Tell me I'm wrong, or tell me what you think about that.
Well, there clearly is a rot in at the center of this, and I think we've seen it on a number of occasions. But this one is particularly salacious, and in some ways, I have to say, in some ways not surprising. I think that again, what you have just described, the use of religion as means for a seat at the table of power, a political power, right. is always problematic, and clearly I think that that Falwell Jr. is a perfect example of that corruption of the relationship between our lives of faith and our political lives. And it's something that we have watched and tried to deal with for years and years and years. So I said, this is, again, not the first time that this sort of two-faced approach to public and private life have come into view. But it's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah. So what was your best moment tonight?
When it ended. I'll be honest with you, it was really hard to sit through it. There were so many lies. There were so many misrepresentations of reality, so much rewriting of history. I do think that actually, I mentioned it before, but I think that that Tim Scott's speech at the end was probably the most reasonable. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with a lot of sort of his positions, but I thought that his demeanor, the way he presented his case, was the way one would expect, I think, a case to be presented in a political dialogue that's worth having. The rest of it was a screed. Is the only word that comes to mind. So I would have to go with the very end. In fact, I thought at the very end, maybe they should have put him on first, because that might have changed the tone of this a little bit. I don't know. But that's sort of what I came away from. But this was a dark miasma of anger. And blame that there was much. I got to be much worse than I expected.
Yeah. Greg Lebel is Professor Emeritus of Political Management at George Washington University and a veteran of several presidential campaigns. I really mean what I'm about to say. I am glad that I can talk with you about all of this. The fact is that we both may need counseling to get some way in touch with what normality is again before this week is over. But we'll meet again like this tomorrow night, and we'll see how it goes. And if we need to call the doctor, I'll do the calling. And for all of you, look for more of our coverage of this convention, including interviews with leaders, activists, and delegates all week at stateofbelief.com. I'm Welton Gaddy. Thank you for watching.